Thank you guys for joining us this morning. Obviously, I'm not an authority on the big book or the steps or whatever, but I will share my experience and strength and hope with you guys. And as Judith said, if there's any questions or comments that you want to make, we'll certainly try to follow up on those. But I want to start out with the portion of the book that Lemmy read, and it talks about if we follow the dictates of a higher power, we will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what our present circumstances are. And that is truly the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous, that no matter what's going on in our lives, that if we're tapped into this power, we can make it through anything without drinking, okay? And that's, such a cool deal. That being said, I want to open us up with a prayer, but let's sit quietly for a minute and see if there's any tight spots in our body, kind of take a body inventory, and then I'll pray, and then we'll get going, okay? Our Creator, we are so grateful for this day. We come to you today with thankfulness. We come to you today with an openness. We ask that you would direct our thinking and our words and guide us on this new journey that we're taking today. We ask that your presence be felt with each and every person here today, that you may guide us and show us the path that you'd have us take. So we pray for open-mindedness. We pray that we may let go of some of our old ideas. We pray that we may see the big book in a new and wonderful way. We love you so much. Thank you. And we pray this in all the holy names of God. Amen. So we are going to look at the map. And the map is our big book, right? And a lot of times you hear that the answers are in the big book, and that may be true to a certain extent, but I think that the answers are really in the actions prescribed in the big book. And that's, when we take the actions that are put in here, something happens. And what happened for me, and hopefully for you, is that the words take on different meaning after we take the actions. The words actually mean something after we do these things. And so, as we go along here, we're going to kind of do this as a group too, as we're going to kind of, when we go through the steps, we'll try to do that as a group too, if we can. So let's go to the contents, okay? That's in the very front of the book. And you'll know it's the contents because it'll say content right at the top of the page. Everybody there? So when we look at this and you go down to the doctor's opinion and Bill's story, and that is, what is the problem? If you want to put that in parentheses right there, right? That's what those two chapters bring out, is what is the problem, okay? And then there is a solution, more about alcoholism, and we agnostics is solution to the problem, okay? And then you go down to how it works into action and working with others. That's the program of action, okay? So if you're working with new people, this is the chapters that are going to bring these things out. So that being said, let's go to the doctor's opinion, page 28 in the Roman numerals. If you have, it should be XXVIII. Unless you have a third edition. And then if you have a third edition, it'll be XXVI, because it'll be 2 pages difference, because there isn't the forward to the 4th edition obviously, in the third edition, right? So that very first paragraph there should say, we believe. Is everybody there? Okay. It says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Now, we are not going to do line by line in the book. I think that everybody should be in a big book study where they do that, okay, where you go line by line in the book. My experience has been that I happen to get a lot of very sick people like Judith, and so, you know, you can't spend the time going line by line through the book with them. You have to get them going on the steps right away because they could die on you, right? So anyway, in this paragraph, it talks about how our problems pile up on us and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. And when I look back, that's the thing that really brought me into Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I knew that when I drank, something happened and all those things, right? But it was all those problems. It was that stuff, you know, the IRS, the child support, you know, my family being gone, the violence in my life, all those things. And these problems just piled up and piled up and piled up. And it seemed like there was no way to get out from underneath it, right? And so that's what finally brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. It might be different for you, but, you know, whenever I go to the jail meetings and that, I always like to read that paragraph because, you know, as they're sitting in jail, you know, most of the time your problems have piled up on you, right? And you're incarcerated or whatever. So that's a good one. If you do any of the institution meetings, it's always a good one to read, okay? This next paragraph talks about frothy emotional appeal. It seldom suffices, right? The message which can interest and hold these alcoholics must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Just a short story. You know, one of my sponsees called one day and he couldn't get sober, and he was drunk, wanted me to come over, and I took my sponsor with me, and this was early on in my sobriety. And when I got there, he had fallen between the cupboards and he had 2 black eyes and he was bleeding everywhere and all that. And I went immediately into the frothy emotional appeal, the same thing that our families did with us, right? The very, you know, we love you so much, why don't you stop drinking, and all that stuff, which had zero effect on me. And it didn't have any effect on Alan either. Of course, he didn't even remember that we were there. But the thing is that when I left there, my sponsor broke out the big book and he pointed out this paragraph to me, and that's always stuck with me because that frothy emotional appeal just doesn't work with us. It just like bounces off, right? It has no effect. Okay, and so this is going to be kind of geared to how I take my sponsees through the steps, and however you learn to do that in your experience by doing it over and over and over, you'll develop your own ways too. But this is just the way that I do it, okay? So let's go down to that bottom paragraph on that page. Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented, unless they can again experience that sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with the firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. Until I read that paragraph with my sponsor, I didn't understand what happened to me every single time, right? I didn't understand that, you know, I love the effect produced by alcohol, especially after I started having all these issues, right? Especially after I started having all the issues with my family, especially after, you know, all the violence and stuff that would happen in my life, because it would relieve that for just a little bit, right? And that phenomenon of craving would happen. And I just thought I'd always changed my mind. One of my other sponsees, David, that's what he always likes to say, is that he would go to the bar, but after a couple beers or whatever, he would change his mind and then he would close the bar down. And I never really put that together, that there was something that was different within me, that allergy of the body had kicked in, and, you know, it says I need more. But the thing, and, you know, I don't know if this is like this for everybody, but for me, when it says, to them, their alcoholic life seems the only and normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented, right? Unless they can again experience that sense of ease and comfort, which comes by taking a few drinks. That's the one that got me, right? Because when I wouldn't drink the second or third day, whatever it was, that's when, you know, the violence would break out in my house. That's when everybody would be afraid. That's when everybody, you know, and I would do things to the people that I love because I don't have that sense of ease and comfort, right? And one more time I would do something and I would put one more thing in the garbage can. And so the only way to get rid of that feeling and that having that full garbage can was to take another drink. And so that cycle would just go and go and go. And then I would try to get sober and, you know, life would get worse. You know, there's nothing worse than that. You know, people are telling you all around you, you know, if you just quit drinking, your life would get better. Well, when we just quit drinking, our life gets worse. And, you know, they don't know what they're talking about, right? It's like, you're crazy. You know, I hate you. You know what I mean? and that's just the way it was, right? I mean, and then would go on and on and on. And I think we can all relate to the part where it says this is repeated over and over and over. And this is where I asked my sponsees, can you relate to that? I mean, did you try this over and over and over? And were you getting the same results, you know, every time? How long could you go without taking a drink before you were crazy, you know? And so it's not fair when we go watch others drink and they can just drink normally. You know what I mean? That's just, you know, come on, let's get after it here, okay? But anyway, so that last line in that paragraph, it talks about this is repeated over and over. And unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. So we have to ask ourselves, what does a psychic change look like? What does that entail? Right? So let's go to 27 in the regular numbers. Kind of keep your finger on this page that we just did and go to 27, okay? Give everybody a chance to get there. Now, in this part of the book, this is where Roland Hazard is talking to Carl Jung over in Switzerland, right? So if we go to the paragraph right there in the middle, it says, yes, replied the doctor, and go down 3 lines. It says, here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Now, this next sentence is what we're looking for in a psychic change, right? Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And isn't that truly what a psychic change is? I mean, where we look at all these things differently, right? Where we see it differently. And, you know, the thing about it is, though, is that we can't bring that about by thinking. You know what I mean? It's not something that, well, I'm just going to change my mind and, you know, these things are going to come about. And that's truly what the rest of these steps are about, is getting that psychic change to come about, right? But first of all, I have to admit that I'm powerless over alcohol and that my life is unmanageable by me. And so, you know, you know, each person has to decide on that. You know, am I truly powerless over alcohol? When I want to, can I? Okay. That being said, and we are going to jump around a little bit. Okay. So let's go to 44. Everybody there? So first paragraph, 3 lines down, 4th line down. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So when you're working with sponsees, or you may ask yourself this question, do those 2 statements, is that what really goes on in my life? If that when I honestly want to, I find I cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking, I have little control over the amount I take, that's me, right? And then the thing that happens to me when I don't drink is I get restless, irritable, and discontent, right? It feels like fingernails on the chalkboard, and I don't know, you know, I don't know what's the matter with me, and I need that sense of ease and comfort. But that line right there that says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. What does that mean? Entirely. I mean, can we quit drinking if we can stick a needle in our arm for a while? Can we quit drinking if we smoke pot? You know, can we quit drinking if we do painkillers? You know, what does entirely mean? Does that mean altogether? So let's go back to page 29 where we were in the doctor's opinion. So if we're talking about ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of our lives are suddenly cast aside, all right? So that's what it's saying in that next paragraph. It says, on the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. And what do you think the rules are? I mean, the steps, yes. The steps, yes. So next page. Page 30 in the Roman numerals, about 3/4 of the way down, it says, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. Now, that sounds really good, right? Just quit. Just stop. You know, everything's going to be fine. Well, I can't speak for everybody else, but just stopping for me is worse than everything else, right? Because everything is real, everything sucks, and it's awful, right? So the thing about that is you know, if to drink and we can't stop, right? But then when we stop, we try to stop, and it's worse, that we're living in an alcoholic hell, right? And that's why I think so many people go back out and do that. So let's go to 151, all right? And we hear this statement in meetings a lot, okay? Very bottom of the page. Now and then a serious drinker being dry at the moment says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take a half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again. Why? For he isn't happy about his sobriety, right? He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. And isn't that the truth in our sobriety? Is that if we're not happy about this thing that we're doing, boy, we're going to look for a relief somewhere else, right? And we see people doing that all the time, right? They come in, get, you know, it's amazing what happens to us. We come in and we stop drinking for a week or two and we get a shower and some food in our belly and pretty soon we're feeling good again. And it's like, well, you know, maybe I was a little hasty in this, you know, and people go back out, right? And they just do that thing over and over and over. And that's why it says this is repeated over and over. Unless we can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of our recovery, right? Because we get in that merry-go-round and it just doesn't stop. So I ask you today, are you happy about your sobriety? Are you grateful for the things that are changing in your life? Thank you, Lemmy. Right? Okay. So let's go to page 18. Top paragraph, it says, an illness of this sort, and we have come to believe in an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. But not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. I'm pretty sure that we've all read that paragraph quite a few times, right? But each time I read that, it really brings home the magnitude of what goes on with us, right? That ripple effect of our drinking and our untreated alcoholism affects everybody that we come in contact with, right? It just ripples out like that. And the children and the sad wives and parents and husbands and wives and all of that stuff, right? And yet the selfishness and self-centeredness, we don't even see it, right? We don't see that part of it. We don't see that our actions affect everybody because our alcoholic life seems to be the only normal one, right? And we lived in that lifestyle. And so to come out and to do these things that we do here, it seems so foreign to us, right? So just take a second and really think about how that affected the people around you. As we get further away from this, those, you know, after we've been sober a while, we kind of forget about that, right? We kind of forget about the people that we've harmed. I mean, especially if we've made our amends and all that. But the reason I want to bring that up is because everything that we do from here on out in our steps is anchored to step one. And without step one, why would we do any of the other things if we don't see that, right? If we don't see it, that I am powerless when I'm drinking because of the allergy of the body, right? And it sets off that phenomenon of craving, but I'm really powerless over alcohol when I'm not drinking, okay? when I'm not drinking. And that has such a ripple effect, and that my life is so unmanageable that it's chaos for everybody else. And it's really hard to see that sometimes. And without really having that surrender, without really seeing how powerless I really am, why would we do the rest of the steps? Why would we do a moral inventory? Why would we go out and make amends to those people that we harmed? I mean, really, you know, who wants to get signed up for that, right? But if we don't see that that's waiting for us, then, you know, we will never really do a thorough 4-step, right? Because it's, so anyway, if we go directly across the page to page 19 there, first paragraph, third line down, says, we feel that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. It's funny, I was talking with one of my guys this morning about this very thing, that, you know, it's really easy to do AA in an AA meeting. You know what I mean? But how does it look at home? How does it look at work? You know, how does it look in all our other affairs? You know, so we can remove the booze from us, and you know, people used to tell me, you need to take a drink. You know what I mean? Because I was, you know, there was something seriously wrong with me. You know what I mean? And I would put my hands on people. So to remove that from me and not have a program of action is two different things, right? Have a program of recovery. So I would like to go to page 24. In the italics writing there. And this is really, if you go to the jail meetings too, this is really a good one to read in there. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. There were so many times that, you know, I would be in jail, and, you know, I'd make all those promises and all that, and I would get out of jail, and usually 3 or 4 days into being out of jail, somebody'd ask me a really tough question like, would you want a drink? You know, and of course, you know, because I forget that I was just in jail for something that I did while I was drunk, or something I did when I wasn't drunk, and you know, and I would forget about that stuff. But there's something in that paragraph that I want to bring out, and it says that we are unable at certain times when we're sober, to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force, right? And for a long time, I thought that paragraph was talking about when I'm drinking, right? But it's talking about when I'm sober. I can't bring that into my mind with sufficient force, right? And so I can be separated from the alcohol, and then all of a sudden there's some sort of mental block or whatever, that I can't remember that look in my daughter's eyes or my son's eyes, that, again, Dad, again, you promised. I can't remember any of that stuff, right? I can't remember the violence that I put on the people that I loved, right? I can't remember any of that stuff. And all of a sudden it sounds like a good idea to take a drink. Now we're going to talk a lot about the bondage of self, right? And I truly believe that that is the issue that we all deal with, right? That's the thing, the bondage of self, that goes hand in hand with the obsession of the mind, right? Because the bondage of self will start saying things like, what about me? Life isn't fair. Why do they get to do that? You know, all these things, it starts yakking, right? And pretty soon the obsession of the mind picks up on that, and they kind of go skipping down the block hand in hand, right? And the obsession of the mind finally says, hey, you know what'll fix that? Just take a drink. Just, you know, it's just one drink. It's not a big deal. All those things that happened before, you're going to be able to control that, you know? And once we do that, so you got the bondage of self, the obsession of the mind, we take the drink, and then we're having sex with the gorilla again, right? And it's just, you know, what happened to my resolve? What happened to that memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago, right? And so at certain times, I can't do it. I can't bring it into my mind, right? That's a very important thing. When you're talking with your sponsees about being powerless, ask them about that. What does that look like for you? What does it really look like for your life to be powerless, okay? Because let's think about this for a second. If I am truly powerless, okay, then I need a power, okay? So let's go to page 30. On page 30, the second paragraph there, it says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self, where the truth lies, right? Not in our false self, but in our true selves, in our innermost selves, that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. So that's really getting to that place of where we're realizing that we are truly powerless, okay? And that the problem is that when I drink, something happens to me, and when I don't drink, something happens to me, okay? And if I'm not tapped into a power, I'm always going to go back to that, because I need that sense of ease and comfort, right? And it doesn't matter how much I hurt those people around me. They start to become second-class citizens, if you will. You know what I mean? They don't even exist anymore, you know, and because I am so wrapped up in me and my feelings and my self-pity and all that, right? And so it's, if I don't admit to my innermost self that I'm powerless, again, we're not going to do the rest of the steps, right? So back on 25. It says there is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching and the leveling of our pride. And I can't speak for all of you, but I know quite a few of the people here on this today, and we suffer from pride, okay? We really do. And what is pride? You know? And the thing about pride is how am I looking, right? How am I looking to the rest of you guys? And if my pride stands in the way of that, you know, isn't that some of the things? Well, and I guess I'll be speaking mostly to the guys here today, that, you know, we come in here broken and all that and still put on the tough guy act. You know what I mean? Laying face down in the gutter and still looking down on people. And that's, you know, that pride stands in the way of my growth, right? That pride stands in the way of me being able to really fully surrender to this thing and fully surrender to my alcoholism. Because if I don't do that, why would I need a power in my life? Why would I, you know, why would I do that? So it's very important that we get to that place. Okay, back on 23. Very first paragraph, third line down, it says, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body, right? Because isn't that the truth? I mean, we will never have the phenomenon of craving happen to us if we don't take the drink, right? That allergy of the body will not kick in if we don't take the drink. But nobody tells this thing up here that, you know what I mean? It constantly is yakking, right? And the disease of alcoholism is cunning, baffling, and powerful. We read it all the time in chapter 5, right? And it'll use any avenue to get back in the door, right? And so if I don't understand it, I can't trust this thing that's, especially if I'm full of pride, especially if I'm full of, I know, especially if I have an opinion all the time. See, that's the thing that happens. You know, when we read on 152 there that we'll always go back to the same old game if we're not happy about our sobriety. You know why that happens? It's because we get, 2 or 3 weeks into this thing, maybe a couple months, and all of a sudden we get our opinion back, right? And when I get my opinion back, then I see that how wrong you guys are. You know what I mean? And that you don't really know what you're talking about. And that all of a sudden I've got a new plan, right? And we see that happen all the time, right? The part about that is you can have a new plan. You can go out there and do those things. Just don't die. Just don't die. Because if you've been here for a little while, you'll know that we bury a lot of people, right? Because they can't admit that they are truly powerless over alcohol. And that by themselves, their lives are unmanageable, right? Sometimes it's really hard to get to that place. Isn't it funny that, and I don't mean funny, but it's, let's go to the last page in chapter 3 on page 43. First full paragraph there, line 3. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems, right? And boy, isn't that the truth? I mean, we don't come in here on a winning streak. We don't come in here, saying, well, I think I'm just going to join AA today. We have to be mangled, right? And the bad part about that is everybody around us is affected by that, of our mangling, right? So if we go down to the bottom paragraph, it says, once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. I can only share my experience, but I always thought I had enough willpower to beat this thing. That if I just mustered up another little chunk of willpower, that I could beat this thing, and then it would be okay, right? And I would be able to straighten out my life. And every time I threw more willpower at it, I got drunker because I just didn't have the needed power, right? And we'll talk about that in 2 weeks about our lack of power, right? And if I don't see that how mangled I really am, again, why would I do the rest of these things? Okay? So, we must have our defense come from a power greater than ourselves, right? And so, that being said, if this is completely full of my trash, full of my garbage, full of my resentments, anger, fear, all that stuff, right? It's really hard to put more in there, right? It's really hard to do that. So I have to pour it out to be able to fill it back up with that spirit, right? And that's what we do with the rest of the steps is we get rid of we do the outpouring so the inpouring can come in, right? Because if our garbage can is full, it's really hard to get more in there. And guess what? That stuff down at the bottom is going to be really stinky, and it's going to spoil the rest of our sobriety, right? So we need to get that stuff out of there, and it must come from a higher power. So we have to create the space for that to happen. And we do that by working the steps with our sponsors, okay? And guess what? It turns out that it's not a punishment, which is a really cool deal, right? Because, you know, nobody can punish us like we do ourselves. You know, we like to beat ourselves up and all that. So this thing is truly a blessing. So I'm going to open it up for a couple minutes for some questions if there is any. And then we'll go from there, okay?